My name is Sam Marcus, and I'll be giving a TED Talk today on moral courage. So, what exactly is moral courage, and how do we apply it in our lives? Throughout our lives, we encounter hard decisions, and it's how we react to these decisions that defines us. It is important as ethical leaders to stand up and rise up for what we believe in, despite fears we have of the outcome and how others will view us after we make that decision. Values play an important role in making ethical decisions, so it's important to understand our own values that we hold close to us, such as love, happiness, truth, honesty, understanding. These all define us as individuals and will play an important factor when making any decision, and especially ethical decisions, and lastly, when using your moral courage. We make decisions big and small every day that have effects both short-term and long-term. And these decisions also affect not only us as individuals, but the community as well. Because the community sees us as ethical leaders and uses us as guidance. And by having a better understanding of our values, we can interpret what the correct ethical decision is in multiple situations. And we can apply the moral courage that we discussed that we can reach within us to reach a desirable outcome and fight for what we believe is right. By standing up for what we believe in as ethical leaders and rising to take a challenge, we can be the ethical leaders in a modern society that's always changing and growing and becoming more diverse every single day. These situations occur every day on both big and small levels. We see in the news lately maybe you've seen with Colin Kaepernick perhaps, how he takes a knee during a football game. This takes moral courage on a multitude of levels. One, because he's risking his job. It takes courage to fight for what you believe in, despite in fear that he might lose his job. He takes pride in what he's doing for it, and he wants to make a change in a society that he feels there is a wrongdoing in the treatment of how police are treating minorities in our country. That's a big example. A smaller example could be a student who stayed up late and slept in and missed an exam or missed a big assignment. They can take a route in which they lie. And by lying, because they're fearful of an outcome, they're being dishonest and they're not telling the truth. And this could have a negative outcome, both short-term and long-term. Whereas if they took the high road and were truthful and honest with the professor, told him what happened, hey, I slept in, hey, I missed the test, but this is why I missed it, and I'm hopeful that we can work it out and talk about it, then you're not only coming above your fears to be honest and truthful, but the professor will see that in you. And I believe that an outcome can be reached that is favorable for both parties involved.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm going to start us out in a conversation about moral courage. And to start us out, I wanted to ask a question, and that question is, what is moral courage? And to start off, I know this is probably a fairly unfamiliar term with many people, so we're going to break it down. We're going to start off here. What is courage? I'm sure we all can describe courageous acts from our own personal lives, entertainment especially. One example that comes to my mind, a fireman running into a burning building to save someone else's life. A very brave, heroic act, zero regard for your own well-being. Like, very courageous act right there. But being morally courage entails something different. And what that is bringing in your own sense of ethics, core values, your own sense of what is right. And an example of that would be an employee in a workplace witnessing upper management treating a fellow coworker unfairly, however that may be. An injustice is being done to the one employee's own sense of morality, and they are standing up, taking a stance to the higher up, defending them and on that stance. And that does pose risk, much not unlike just being simply courageous, like the firefighter, but it's less immediate physical harm. It can be reputation at work, emotional well-being, even could lose a job for standing up to higher up like that. But your own sense of what is right is being defended and represented. And that is exactly what being morally courageous is. That's what moral courage is. And there is a author about there's an author who writes on ethical theories and principles, Rushworth Kidder, and he describes 5 attributes to being moral. And what these 5 are, the first one here, being honest. This can build trust, shows truthfulness. The next one he describes being responsible, showing reliability. The next one after that, being respectful. After that one, fairness. And finally, showing compassion. All these 5 attributes together exemplify being moral. And that is the first step to being morally courageous. And I wanted to leave you off with a quote about more of a definition, so to say, of moral courage. This came from a piece on Gandhi, who famously won independence from the British Empire for India through famously peaceful means. And what this quote talks about moral courage, it says, moral courage means standing up for your own ethics and principles, even when it is not convenient, and most important of all, when it could even be to your detriment. Thank you. Sam is going to now discuss how to apply the concept of moral courage to real life situations.
As Matt discussed about moral courage, we'll continue to discuss how we now apply moral courage and how we can use it to our advantage and get a better understanding of how it works. So moral courage can be applied by first identifying the problem. It's important to see the problem that you're trying to stand up for or that you want to fight for to make it right. Then after you've identified the problem, it's key to home in on your values. It's important to know what it essentially triggered, whether you were angry about it or whether you were fearful or you wanted to give input of your wisdom. It's important to understand your values that then play into your overall decision-making process, into fighting for what you believe in. Then it's important to analyze the situation and also see the opposing arguments. It's important to see from both sides, not just your own, of what the situation is and why other people might see it their way and why you see it your way. Then it's important to take action and overcome the mental barriers. Courage itself is all physical, whereas moral courage requires overcoming mental barriers, overcoming the fear and stigma that comes along with certain aspects of moral courage. So it's important then to continue to take action afterwards. It's important to endure. It's important to continue to fight for what you believe in, or else your ideology might just die out. And lastly, you have to assess how far you've come, how far you've progressed, and also it's important to check your stance. Make sure that you're still in the right. Make sure that you're still fighting for what you believe in and you're not being too influenced by others. We see examples of this throughout. We can see moral courage being applied in the workplace. We can see moral courage being applied in society as individuals and also in a global and world perspective. And these are the 4 main ones. There's a few more, but these cover as a whole all the areas which you can apply your moral courage. So it's also important then to be knowledgeable and to be understanding for both sides, as we just discussed, because without that, then you can never reach a conclusion, or you'll never eventually find the middle ground for what you're fighting for and be able to obtain your outcome. It's important to be honest, because without honesty, you're essentially lying to yourself and to everyone else around you. So it's important to really understand what you're fighting for, why you're fighting for it. It's also very important to be open-minded. Without an open mind, then you'll never achieve and never see both sides of an argument. You'll just continue to push your agenda, and when you push your agenda on someone else, it never ends up going well, does it? It always ends up with arguments, conflict. But when you're open-minded and you see both sides of the argument, you're able to reach a common ground. And this is all based off of character and conduct. It's who you are and how you express it. And furthermore, it's value-based character, which results into value-based conduct, which equates into ethical leadership. It's important to have your values and then conduct those values into ethical leadership. Then it's also important to throw in a few factors such as altruism. With this, you need to be, essentially it ties into being open-minded. With this, you need to be able to understand other people's needs, wants, and desires. Because if you just throw out the well-being of others just to push your agenda, then you will cause disaster and harm to others. So with a diagram, I'll be able to display this better. So essentially with today's modern, we'll use politics as an example. So if we have Democrats represented by D here and Republicans represented by R, to be open-minded is to be able to reach a common ground. If you're fighting for what you believe in, it's important to also understand the other side. So by standing up for what you believe in, we'll find the middle ground. So if both of these sides are pushing outward for their own agenda, if you become open-minded, you become understanding, then you can change these arrows. Instead of going outward, you can work them inward. And by working them inward, you can then eventually reach the common ground in the middle. That way you fight for what you believe in still, while at the same time understanding the needs of others and understanding where they come from and their morals and their values, and you can then reach a common ground. This is also important then when we see another diagram, which sums up moral courage as a whole. So moral courage as a whole can be summed up into a web. So we'll have 3 circles. So in the center, we have moral courage, represented by MC. So this is moral courage. So moral courage is defined by principles. It's also important to understand that moral courage is made up of danger, the danger aspect of what you're getting yourself into and the fear of also that you need to overcome. Also, it's important, as we discussed, to endure. Without endurance, eventually your ideology or your concept or what you're fighting for will die out. Then these in-between points are also important, because with just principle and endurance and without regard for danger, you'll be foolish. You won't realize the cost or what might happen if you fight for what you believe in, or if you disregard others. You're it's being not open-minded. It's being not prepared for what might happen as a danger. At the same time, if you're just using principle and danger as what you're fighting for, then you'll be timid and you'll never endure, because you'll never continue to fight for what you believe in, because you might have your principles set and you might know the dangers, but if you're not willing to continue to fight for it, then you will never truly be able to push your side of the argument and fight for what you believe in. And lastly, there's just the danger and endurance part. Without your principle, that's more of the physical part of courage, but it just shows that you're not using on principles. You take into account danger and you use endurance, but you're not fighting for on principles. You're just fighting for what you think is right.
We talked a lot about what moral courage is and the methods of application today. Although, how do we apply being morally courageous for the greater good? Through the social change model of leadership, which I have right over here, we can come together to stand up and rise up for something bigger than ourselves. The social change model of leadership development takes the approach of leadership in 3 different ways. The first being through purpose. You have to have a purpose for your cause if you want to create a positive social change and impact on the world today. The second is through collaboration. Without collaboration, we can't get things done. If you're doing it by yourself, it is very hard to make a social change movement happen. You need a group, you need other people backing you, and it takes working together in a cohesive manner to make a social change happen. And the last important piece of the social change model is through values. The social change model is a values-based system, and those 3 values that the social change model holds true to itself are also 3 different ways. The first one being through group collaboration, and the group having a purpose. You can create, and all of the group having the same values, you can create the social change that way. The second one being social. Obviously, it's a social change impact, and you have to be social and get out there to create awareness. The last one being individual. You have to know what your own individual values are and why you're going to be fighting for this cause and why your moral courage is coming into play for it. Values should be at the core of any decision that we make. They are what we hold dear to our hearts and can implicate how we use our moral courage as students, employees, a sister, a brother, or any role that we play in society. Through the social change model, we're able to shape the mindset for the greater good. The other method of doing so is through using the golden circle. We start off with the first circle, which is in the center. This is the why part. Why does it matter? Why should other people care? The second one, the middle ring, is how. How are you going to implement it? How are you going to make this change happen? And the final circle is what. What matters to you? By going from the inside out, you're able to figure out what your moral courage is telling you, what your values are telling you about this cause, how you plan on implementing it, and then what matters to society. By caring for others, knowing oneself, and creating trust amongst everyone in this collaborative manner, you're able to start taking a stand, to stand up and rise up for a greater cause. That is all we have for today. Thank you for joining us on our TED Talk, and have a good night.